Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about Häxan, which is a Swedish-Danish silent movie from 1922. It's part lecture, part sort of dramatised documentary about witchcraft. Well, it's previously been subtitled Witchcraft Through the Ages.
Yes.
Häxan is a Swedish word meaning witches.
Yes.
And it's in 7 chapters. Of different types. I mean, the first chapter is these woodcuts that say, these are images of what witchcraft was thought to be, or what witches were thought to be. But then it moves on into enactments of kind of fever dreams, or the devil coming into someone's room. Things eventually moves into the present day, right at the very end.
It's an extraordinary film. I think we should begin.
It's pretty
with
amazing,
that. Right?
You and I. Neither of us was aware of it before we saw it last week.
That's right. We went blind to a screening at the BFI.
Yeah.
And it was really a question of, we were willing to go see anything, and this happened to be on, and and it had a pianist, so we just took a chance on it, and I was gobsmacked.
Yeah, I was pretty blown away, I must say. Certainly by the end, It was a beautifully projected thing. The restoration we found out through Holly, who knows a projectionist at the BFI, found out for us that it comes from the projection we saw came from a 2007 restoration by the Swedish Film Institute. It was in HD, and it looked unbelievable,
amazing.
It looked like it had been filmed yesterday.
It looked so great that I just immediately assumed it was 4K.
I thought it might be 4K, but
and it turns out not to be. It was a 2K, but the quality of the image was just so beautiful and textured, and the whole film looks gorgeous. Actually, it looks like kind of Renaissance paintings filmed in black and white. It was just a beautiful thing to see on a big screen.
Yeah, and it's obviously been retinted. It's not pure black and white. It's tinted black and white. But I mean, there's so much clarity and sharpness to the image. It's kind of incredible. I've seen some pretty decent, restorations and original prints of very old films, but I haven't seen anything that looked this good.
Yes,
ever. It was fantastic.
It was fantastic,
and it's not just the kind of quality of the image, but it's also the design of the image, the lighting, the staging.
Yes,
these images are incredible. Yeah. So let's just kind of. Well, let's say first of all we hadn't heard of it, and it turns out that we were out of the loop on this one, because when you said on Facebook,
yes,
amongst your friends, I've seen this thing Häxan, I'm looking forward to talking about it. People sprang up,
yes,
saying, "Oh, I remember seeing this years ago. Oh, it's a bit of a cult film."
Yes,
bit underground.
I think particularly if you're interested in horror. It must be an originary source of several horror genres, really, which I think is kind of where a lot of people were coming from. Yeah, a lot of these friends of mine are horror aficionados, and obviously this is a key film if you're into films about devils and devil worship and witches and things like that, nuns.
I guess so. So the film is organised in these 7 chapters, and it's done as a lecture. There are English subtitles, thankfully, throughout the whole thing, because there are extensive Swedish intertitles explaining what's going on. It's a direct address to the audience, and it's not only direct to the audience, but it's direct from the filmmaker. Benjamin Christensen is the director and writer and founding sort of guy behind it. It was his investigation of kind of witchcraft that led to this thing. He's Danish. That's where the Swedish-Danish connection, I think, comes in. And he addresses the audience as me. I think this. I saw this. I worked out this. I heard this. So that's kind of interesting. It's someone really directly speaking to you.
Yes.
Which I kind of wasn't expecting. Was a little bit arresting. A little bit. Oh, didn't think that was going to.
Yes.
Something different.
Well, it felt like a kind of alibi initially. Because I thought this lecture format is a way of making an excuse for all of these extraordinary things that you're going to be shown. And they really are quite extraordinary. I mean, they would be extraordinary now, but to think that just like 4 years after World War One, you're showing these sexual situations, this kind of torture porn,
the devil creeping into a girl's room, seducing her.
Yes, I mean it's really quite amazing. you know, and beautifully imagined.
Yeah, kind of not exactly not too graphic. This is of the 20s we're talking about, but still a little bit shocking for the time. And there's a kind of casualness to it, which I think is part of that. Like you have in chapter 2 maybe. You have a witch cutting off someone's finger, I think. I think they want the ring, and the finger kind of comes with it.
Yes.
And she says something like, "Oh, it's been left out there far too long. It stinks." And there's something very casual about that, which is kind of interesting. Like, I also think that there's a tone to it from the very beginning that basically says, "We're modern people. We know that witchcraft is not real, but here's what these primitive people thought."
Well, actually, the film begins by you're being shown medieval manuscripts with actually woodcuts of scenes with witches, right? And the film kind of uses those as a kind of a springboard, for visualizing. So it's like the medieval illuminated manuscripts are the source of the scenes to follow. So one of the things that the film is saying is, this is the way that the Middle Ages imagined sorcery and the devil and so on, right? And it goes from the prints onto the film's diegetic kind of world. And actually it works quite incredibly. So one of the things that the film is so amazing at is that it's actually making a political statement, right? It's saying this is the way that women were oppressed, throughout the Middle Ages, that an accusation of sorcery, could be a reason to kill her. If she was too pretty, you could kill her. If she was too old, you could kind of kill her. You could get her to sleep with you, so you can abuse women in all of these ways, and you can get rid of them, through the accusation and the belief in the devil and sorcery.
Yeah, and the anti-church aspect is at its strongest when the Inquisition sort of committee comes in sort of chapter 4 or 5, and they are. I think it may be the element of the film that is most notorious, is the kind of torture of the old woman who then is she's tortured into telling them these wild stories of the stuff that she was seeing, which are then enacted. Yes. And there's a thing about birthing all of the demons.
Yes.
That's probably the image that I think I can imagine that's the image people would think of when they think of this film.
So that's an extraordinary thing where she's birthing demons.
But the church members themselves are portrayed as these fat, leering, gluttonous.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They are very unsympathetically portrayed. And it's interesting because I guess I always kind of thought of Scandinavia as somewhere, it's very kind of atheist there. And they kind of seem to think quite clearly in that respect. But I always just thought about that in modern terms, not really knowing the history of Scandinavia. So I never thought of it as like, this is a time in history where you would have thought, in the 20s I mean, not the medieval times. In the 20s you kind of would have thought this is when people were much more deferential towards the church. So I don't know whether this is asymptomatic then, or if like Scandinavia was kind of that ahead of the curve that this is kind of what they thought even back then. Do you know what I mean?
Arguably the most famous Swedish film, or certainly amongst them, is Bergman's The Seventh Seal. And actually a woman, being burned for being a witch is, one of the central kind of, thematics, scenes certainly, in all of the film. So, this idea that somehow they're more logical and less, religiously involved and so on is not quite.
Well, that's true, but there's a difference between just using imagery derived from or of religious sort of ritual or what have you, and espousing belief in it. This film is full of imagery of the devil devil worshippers and kind of all kind of madnesses of religion. But I don't think there's a question at all that the film doesn't believe in the reality of what it's showing you.
Well, I think Bergman's The Seventh Seal is also imbricated in faith. In fact, it is about that. It's it's about playing chess with the devil for your soul, right? So, but anyway, I know where you're coming from.
Yeah, exactly.
And the film surprised me as well, because it just has some images that you think you're going to remember as long as you live, really. So there's this whole thing about, how do you know that somebody's a witch, right? So it's done as a lecture. One of the bits is, how do you know somebody's a witch? And, so they show you that, you can tell who is a witch by these various things, and what do witches do? Well, they have to pay homage to the devil, and basically they have to kiss his bum, right? Yes. So you have all these women lined up to kiss, the devil's ass, right? Like, I mean, that's unbelievable to see.
The devil also is played by the director.
Yes.
And, so he's got his way with that one.
Yes. It's quite something to see, really.
The makeup and prosthetics as well are just extraordinary.
Yes.
I mean, they would stand up today. I mean,
yes.
Like when I say it looks like it's from yesterday, I'm not joking about that. Obviously, you can tell it's not, but the quality of everything that contributes to the image is unbelievable. And the prosthetics and the design and the costumes, all that sort of thing, are fantastic. And then it has this self-aware streak where it jumps sort of. They're talking about torture at one point, and the film jumps out of what it's showing you and says, "Oh, and by the way, one of my actresses said, I'm going to use the thumbtacks. We're going to do this. Like, I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to do the thumbtacks." So she's in when they do that. She's in she's in modern dress, and the film shows her having the thumb screws applied, and then the narration comes back up and says something like. I'll be delicate. I won't tell you the confessions that I got out of this woman.
So it's very witty.
Yeah.
But so there is kind of like a voyeuristic element, though. So kind of part of the pleasure of watching this film is the care that it takes to show you the kinds of things that people go to museums of torture and things like that to see, right? So they show you all the instruments of torture, and almost he shows them to you one by one. This is how confessions were wrenched out of witches, right? And, he shows you the instrument, and then he shows you how it operates, right? And it goes from like thumb screws to the rack, right? And he shows you kind of, how it operates, right? Yeah. So there is kind of a calling on kind of people's worst impulses, like, you really want to see. So under the guise of a lecture, he's also kind of feeding this prurient kind
feeding
of...
your demons.
Yes, he is, isn't he?
I agree, yeah. And that's one of the interesting things about it. And there's also an element, the thing that reminded me of like fake news and kind of modern sort of obsession with how people are lying to you and things like that, or what people refuse to believe, because there's a thing about the interrogating committee. They're interested in sort of torture, really, above all else. They're actually not interested in justice for the Lord or have you. And you get the feeling that it's not explicit at all in the film, but you understand implicitly that there is nothing that old woman could say that would stop them from torturing and killing her, basically. And that kind of that made me think of sort of the way today. Like, I can't get into an argument with my dad about Brexit where I will have a chance of winning. Do you know what I mean?
I know.
And nor will he. To be fair, nor will he the other way around. Like, we just live in different worlds now.
Yes.
But there's no possibility of communicating honestly, and that kind of reminded me of that. Like, and there's also the aspect of not believing women. Like the committee is there to, in theory, take a woman's testimony and do something with it. But of course, what they're interested in is just their own ends.
Actually, the Brexit thing is a very interesting comparison because, particularly with the priests, or when you have those scenes of the Inquisition or the, the traveling court of the traveling ecclesiastic court, and you really get the sense that they're so imbricated and so rigid in the parameters of their mode of understanding the world, right? And they can maneuver that so well. They're so Jesuitical about that, that basically no matter what anybody says, they will twist it to their own ends or to their own definition, or, you know,
Yes.
kind of, if they want to sleep with this woman, no matter what she says, it'll be turned into a kind of a power thing that they can use against her to get what they want. And actually in that, I think there is a lot of this divide, this Brexit divide, really. Like, you know, it's almost a question of faith. Yeah. That kind of, you know, if you believe this is what you believe, and nothing else will shock you out of it or convince you out of it. And logic and reason have no place in this. And moreover, I have the power to turn whatever you say into whatever suits my needs. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like when you imagine like what that old woman would have been saying to them to try and get out of it. Like basically, if she were to say anything along the lines of "I'm not a witch," then well, that's the devil talking.
Yes.
And then if she was to try and be clever or
Yes.
take a risk and say, "Okay, it's true," then they go, "Ah, you see, I believe you."
Exactly. Yeah.
They can just believe what they want to
It's
believe.
a no-win situation.
And continue on the themes of kind of sympathy for women. This is where the film for me became. It was kind of an interesting curiosity for a long time, and then the final chapter is where I went, "Oh, this is special."
Yes.
The final chapter brings you into the modern day, brings you into 1921, and says, "Okay, so let's we've established over the course of the last 6 chapters that this is what people thought witches were, and this is how they operate, and this is all the stuff that went around it. But let's see what actually was going on." You know, because it basically has this interesting thing where it says they weren't just mad people, all these people from the past. They were responding to something real, and they just thought it was the devil. They thought it was hexes and what have you. But if it wasn't that, what was it?
Yes.
Which is a great thing to do. And it says it does have a very early 1900s perspective where it says there is something real called hysteria.
Yes.
Which is so we have still moved on.
Freud had already written.
Yeah, so we have moved on a little bit since Hexen was made, but it says real things, that real problems that women actually have could maybe convince you that there was something paranormal going on, or could have when you didn't really know anything about the world. And there is also a suggestion, because then it goes on to say, we've switched the burning at the stake for a mild shower. Which is progress, but there is still room for more progress.
Actually, my understanding of that was slightly different.
Okay.
It was we've switched now to asylums, right?
Yeah.
Some of them which are very fancy and have nice showers.
Yeah.
But actually,
that final shot is of a burning at the stake.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
So I think that's kind of I think what the film is sort of saying at that point is, we've made progress. We're no longer murdering women. We're sort of trying to treat them, but there's still a long way to go.
But we're locking them up in asylums.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And they might have a nice shower, but actually you're still locking them up.
Yeah, exactly. And the other part to it is, it recalls one specific shot, one that I remember, one that struck me, which was early on in the film. It shows, it's talking about what the devil does to people. And one of the things it shows is the devil seducing a woman. Actually, in a couple of ways. One of them is the devil seducing you, and the other is devil sleeping with you. And the seduction one is this woman lying in bed, gets up, and she, naked, walks out. She's away from the camera. You see the back of her. And she walks out to where the devil is kind of luring her. And actually, she walks into the half-light. And the light is beautiful and kind of just illuminating her by the side. It's incredible to look at. And the other one is the devil climbing into a girl's room and having his way with her. And that's recalled right at the end, where a girl who is she's in hospital. She's in a hospital bed, in a ward with other beds around, other people, is abused by a doctor. The doctor is I can't remember exactly what he's up to, but it's basically sexual abuse is what's being depicted. And she's screaming. And then the doctor literally disappears. It's not like he runs away. He is disapparated on film. And so when people rush in to find what's going on, he's no longer there. And it looks like she's mad and what have you.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And then the next shot, I cut to the same doctor, sitting at a desk, saying, "I'm afraid your daughter has hysteria. We're going to have to admit her." is an incredible kind of depiction of institutional sexual abuse.
Yes.
Which I thought that was remarkable, and the text goes along. The text says something like, maybe it wasn't the devil doing this, maybe it was the doctor or the local mayor or the police chief or people in positions of authority it talks about.
Yes.
I thought it was incredible.
I think
ridiculously relevant.
I think it is incredible, and one of the things that is so extraordinary about watching this film is actually to be gobsmacked by the cinematic skill behind it. I mean, this guy is someone who knows how to tell stories visually, and actually just even how to dramatize images. So, kind of each shot seems, extraordinarily rich in terms of like framing, in terms of composition, in terms of angle, right? And there's enormous variety within that, across the whole of the film. So, it's a real pleasure to watch. Some of the things seem to me to be like Renaissance paintings, but then the use of woodcuts, and then some of the lighting was just out of this world. It was kind of luminous, and it lent a three-dimensionality kind of to the image, right? So, and that then goes along with the storytelling thing, which, is what you've just described. So the combination of being able to create these images, right, and to create the variation amongst them, and then to have the storytelling skills, to kind of be able to convey kind of, quite complex things very elegantly, and really with what seems almost like a minimum of means, is really quite something. I was really gobsmacked.
I was blown away. I understand, although this is the first that I've heard of Benjamin Christensen, that he's been compared sort of favourably to the likes of D.W. Griffith and George Méliès and the other kind of real innovators and geniuses of the time in silent film. You can totally see why.
Well, I tell you, if one of my areas of interest were horror films, which they're not. I mean, I'm forcing myself to see them now because I think they are the most relevant, critical, exciting genre of the moment. But the fact is that myself, in terms of my personality and as a viewer, I don't like being scared, and I don't like seeing gory stuff. It surprises people sometimes because obviously, like, I love action films and so on, but that's to me is different than horror. So I'm not somebody who's very knowledgeable on horror, even though, I do try to see what's on at the moment. But were I to be that person, this to me would rank essentially as, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or definitely Griffith, or just like a foundational film, in a whole kind of strand of cinema.
Yeah. One other thing that occurred to me was when I was reading around the film a little bit, trying to get some more information on it. One of the words or phrases that came up regarding the restoration is speed corrected, which just it reminded me of They Shall Not Grow Old, where like the part of the project of that film seemed to be to show the original black and white footage to its least advantage.
Yes.
Just the idea that you can just change the speed to make it look like it should have looked.
No, but there is something. So by speed correction, I also think, because silent films were cranked, right? And the idea was then that when you projected it, you kind of projected at the same speed as it was filmed if you wanted things to look like they were moving normally. And certainly for my generation of people interested in cinema, one of the barriers to being interested in silent cinema was that the speed was not corrected. So actually, you were showing films that had been filmed at 8 images per second, and you were showing them at 24. So everybody moved like it was too quick. And actually, you thought that that's what silent films were, that people watching the original audience watching these films were also watching these jerky movements and so on, which is obviously not the case. So I always assumed, speed corrected to mean that actually, it's transferred to contemporary film stock, but kind of at the correct speeds, to show movement the way it was intended to be shown.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the point.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I just wanted to mention again that I didn't like that about They Shall Not Grow Old.
Yes, I get your drift. But anyway, I think what we should mention for anyone who's interested who hasn't seen Hexen and who really would like to, that Criterion has a fantastic version of this, which is so I think they've done two releases. One was a restoration that they themselves undertook in, I think, 2001 and 2002. And this is now, the new version is the restoration by the Swedish Film Institute in 2007, which is what we saw.
Yeah.
So if you would like to watch this film, and I really highly recommend it. It's to me, it is one of the core classics now of, in the history of cinema. Then Criterion would be a place to go to for it.
I was really glad. I did think that I thought that the live accompaniment was not up to much. To be honest, you're not going to remember it, are you? But I thought, man.
I really appreciated it. I mean, I kind of, I think there's something about hearing live music in a cinema that just enlivens my senses.
Yeah, no, the fact that there was a live accompaniment was great. I just wish it had been good. I found it dull.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, it seemed to be clearly improvised, but I really appreciate it.
I didn't think it was improvised. They said it was improvised, but there are points where...
It looked improvised to me.
Well, I mean, that would explain it not being very good, I suppose. But there were points where, the pianist was definitely prepared for things that were happening on screen, because he synchronized certain things with, kind of knocks on doors or whatever. There definitely seemed to be a certain degree of preparation that he'd been able to... I would imagine that he had watched the film already before... Anyway, neither here nor there. I just wasn't impressed by it. But it didn't ruin the film. The film was fantastic. There you go.
All right. Thank you very much for listening. We highly recommend this film. In fact, I would almost plead, do go see it if you get a chance, or do get the DVD if you get a chance. There's a very, very poor version of it on YouTube. Avoid it. I think it'll ruin the experience if you see that before you see a proper copy.
It's a wonderful, interesting, intelligent, feminist, brilliant piece of work.
Yes. So do, highly recommend it. Do see it if you get a chance. And thank you very much for listening.
We're eavesdropping at the movies. Oh, go on, you want to do it?
Well, we are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are
on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook, and eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.